All right, in recognizing that I am not the best UI designer, I thought I'd go through how to use the film log, especially when creating a new user, and kind of go through the process. Since there's a few steps involved that aren't super intuitive, so just to get right into it. Oh, and by the way, sorry for the audio. If this proves useful, I'll make another video and do a better job. But for now, I'm trying to keep it simple. Anyway, so first things first, I'm gonna click on register, and I'm gonna create a user. I'm not gonna include an email address. I certainly could. And I would certainly recommend it, but right now it's optional. I did that on purpose because people's privacy and whatnot. I think that's all the parking meters. But if you do things like forget your password, if you don't put in an email address, there's no way to recover it. So that's kind of up to you. Currently, I don't have a reset password function actually implemented yet, but that's forthcoming because it's kind of important. So, and there might be a time where email becomes required, but for now, if I don't need it, I'm not going to ask for it. So anyway, created a testbob5. So yay. Now I'm going to log in as testbob5. Bob5. There we go. And the overview is if you're a new user. And it will basically tell you more or less what I'm going to go through. So really the only hard requirement before you can actually start making film logs is you need a camera. So I'm going to add, see, I've already done this a few times. I'm going to add a Minolta. Just for example's sake, I'm at a 570, and I'm going to add Intrepid, which is 4x5. And you can see there's some room for improvement here, because if, say, I was adding a Bronica or a Hasselblad, they have 120 and 220 backs, so I need to maybe think about that. Or you can have an Intrepid 8x10 that technically could also shoot 4x5 film. So the reason film size is here is it actually corresponds to the type of printout that you're going to get when you're logging films and kind of what the UI looks like. So that's really what it's for, and that's actually why you need to make a camera first. So room for improvement here, but for now, you can just create the camera, and hopefully you don't have, hopefully too many people don't run into this problem. But anyway, I'm also going to create some lenses. So let's say Rokkor 50mm 1.7. Kind of call these whatever you'd like. Okay, so now I can associate one or more lenses with the cameras. And this is just to help when you're logging films. If you want to specify which lens you use to shoot a particular exposure, you can put it in. So that's why I'm doing it here. And the reason I have to go to each camera is because, you could have multiple cameras that can use the same lenses and amalgamation of all that. So I kind of did it that way to make it flexible, if not super intuitive. And you can also add filters. At this point, everything else is optional. But I'm going to go ahead and add one. Let's use an example here. 2.0. There's my filter. I'm not going to go through enlargers and holders. Enlargers are if you're doing darkroom prints and you want to track what enlarger you used and what lens and all that stuff. And then holders are for if you're using sheet film. I'm really bad about keeping track of my holders after I get back from like a vacation. Like I write down what everything is in like my little notebook, but then I forget and I don't remember where I wrote it down. And then inevitably I end up thinking a holder's empty and it's not, and I expose an expensive sheet of film. So I made a little section where you can actually track the state of your holders, which is helpful for me. I don't know how helpful this can be for other folks, but that's what those settings are. Feel free to sort of poke around. But I'm going to try to keep things focused, at least for now, on the main core of the film log, which is adding films. So I'm going to make a binder, and a binder corresponds to a real like 3-ring film binder that you can use, like you can buy off B&H and Freestyle and other places. In my case, I usually organize by year. You can organize however you'd like, but I'm going to do year for this example. And then underneath the binder, you can have one or more projects. You do need at least one, so if you don't really want to organize that way, just make a generic project and just stuff everything in that. What I tend to do is I'll have projects both for sort of generic photography, like black and white photography, but I'll also have projects specific to like really important things I'm doing, like I don't know, portrait shoot or a vacation. I'll tend to lump all my negatives that I took at that point, regardless of size, under like a particular vacation. So if I'm going like backpacking somewhere, I don't know, like Colorado, then I'll have a divider for that, like an actual physical divider that you can buy from like Office Max or whatever, and I'll use that to sort of keep everything organized. Up to you. For now, I'm just going to do just a simple generic one. And in here, I'm going to make, my first roll, give it an identifier. We'll say we logged it today. Let's say we did a 36 exposure roll. We'll pick delta, and we won't push it. And then we'll say I'm using, yeah, X700. Say, put those in. These are optional. Actually, a lot of the form's optional. And some of it autofills. So for example, you can just leave that blank and it'll just pick whatever. The things that aren't optional is the camera is required. That's why we had to make a camera early on. And the reason it's required, it's not super intuitive, but like I was saying earlier, it corresponds to the size of the printout that you're going to get. And admittedly, this is a little confusing. In fact, I should probably move this. You could actually pick like 4x5 here, even though I have a 35mm camera. And that's not right. But the reason I did this is because pretty much for 35mm, you can have different sizes, and that's really annoying to deal with in the code. And so right now it's decoupled. The difference is film size actually corresponds to film stock. So if you want to track your film, your films as you shoot them, to know how many you have in the fridge, for example, you can do that here, but you have to specify the specific type of roll that you have. And I didn't figure out a super intuitive way to do that and couple it with the camera yet. But I'm working on it. So for now, you kind of have to keep an eye on it. I know it's dumb, but that's really what that's for. So I need to come up with a better way. Similarly, with development, right now you just type whatever you want. I kind of want to have a way to maybe either reference the massive dev chart or put in development recipes that you can add. So you can actually put in the recipe and then put in the parameters of like what you actually did. So, you intended on developing HP5 a certain way, but you ended up doing it like you accidentally left it too long in the tank or, whatever. So for now, this is just an open string, but I'll hope to add that more complicated features. Anyway, you can also add some notes. So finally, after all that ramble, you can save it. And if you want to add more, you can. But I'm going to click on it and get the juicy bits. So this part's kind of important. You can add exposures one at a time or in ranges. So I'm going to start by adding one here. And I'm just going to put in random values. It doesn't really matter. So there's one exposure. But now I can add multiple ones. So say I took the rest of these using similar settings. And I don't want to have to type this in like all the time. So I don't know, set it F8, use that lens. Say, yeah, I did incident metering, and I didn't use a filter, and we'll say, I don't know, dogs. It's not very creative. All right. So there you go. So this is really like cool if you're doing, say, street photography, and you did mostly the same exposures, and you don't want to have to put all them in at the same time, because you can always go back in and make minor adjustments. So, say, I don't know, puppy, and say maybe I did this one at 5.6. You can go and make that change. And there you go. So that makes it super convenient, especially when you're doing 35mm, because there's just tons of exposures. For now, we'll say we're done. I could add more exposures here, but just to illustrate sort of the main point of the film log is that once I'm done doing this, the main reason I wrote this whole app was to actually be able to print these out. So a couple points. If you notice, I'm using Chrome. And you can use whatever browser you want, but I found Chrome makes it easy to print because I can adjust the margins, so I can use a hole punch. So if you're going to do the same thing, I would copy these settings down because they tend to work pretty well. Let's see. I guess that's most of them. They tend to work pretty well, and this is what I actually like. This literally the main reason I wrote the whole tool. Everything else is just cool features that I added because I actually do use these so I can have a nice printout to log with my negatives. And the cool thing is you don't have to do this. You could just leave them here. I do have a way to search. I'm improving that feature, but I have a way to search through things. So if you want to find negatives through this instead of, say, Lightroom, or you want to start doing printing, because I have a whole section for that, you can. So it doesn't have to. You don't have to print anything out if you don't want to. But that was the original design point. I'm going to do maybe another project so you can see what a 4x5 looks like. So first large format. And we'll just call it BW2. Oh, and by the way, these IDs are unique per binder. So all your projects in one binder have to have, well, every log has to have a unique file number within the binder. That includes across projects, but other binders, you can reuse them. And the reason that's important is like for every year I have a studies in black and white photography project in my binder. So I have one from 2016, one from 2017, one from this year, and I start numbering those BW1 up to BW whatever. I did that because it's easier to use. I don't end up with some huge number, as it moves on. because you can figure out what thing you want by just finding what binder it's in and then just going from there. So that's one thing to keep in mind. If people don't like that, or maybe it's a silly idea, feel free to let me know. And speaking of, if you do find a bug, you just click log a bug, and that will take you to a place where you can do as it says, log a bug. And I'm pretty on top of these. It's also a way to maybe get a hold of me. I'm also in the Discord, our analog chat channel, so you can get in touch with me that way as well. But anyway, flying off the rails here. So getting back to it, let's make a large format. So I'm going to pick 4x5, and we'll say we used, I'm going to say T-Max 3200 because I hold out hope that maybe that will one day be in sheet form. And just to show you that you don't have to put these in, I'm going to ignore them. And just to point that out, actually, you don't have to put anything there too. You can leave that blank. You can really leave a lot of these things blank, like I said earlier. So, and if you want to go back in and edit them and fill them back in, you totally can. So, I'm going to just, interested in being quick here, I'm going to add the same thing. And we'll say used reflective. We'll say used a filter. Now, since I'm logging large format, there's a couple of additional things you can add. So I put in a subject, say, yeah, sure, sunset. Why not? Or what did I have? Did I have Lizard Man? Sure, why not? Lizard Man. And you can also put in development. I put that here because if you're like pushing, if you took a bunch of pictures during an outing and you pushed film or you used the Ansel Adams method, I don't have the zone system here yet, but if you change development, you can actually put that here, and it'll track it for that exposure. You can also use different films, and the reason I did it that way is if I'm taking a picture of something very specific, I guess like Lizard Man or a sunset, I could have taken it, like in Ektar, in Velvia, in Tmax, but I would file them all in the same print file. So for me, I like to have the ability to specify that. It's totally optional, and if you just leave this blank, it will assume that you use the film up here. A note about that is if you do that and you log it, like I'm going to do here, it will subtract from your film stock using this film. So when you log it, make sure you log it in correctly so you keep track of your sheets of film if you're using the film stock feature, and then you shouldn't have a problem. But if you log it and then edit it, it's not going to work that way, and you're going to have to go manually mess with it. So I mentioned that for sheet films because it's a huge pain in the ass, at least for me, to figure out how many sheets I have in a box without actually going and looking. And it's really important to keep track of it as well because you just can't, you can't look. So kind of word of warning on that. Anyway, once I've added these, I can print these out. And the important point I wanted to make is that it looks different from if it's 35 millimeter because it corresponds roughly to the print file sheet, namely that you can put 4 exposures on one sheet. I can actually add more exposures. In fact, I'll do that real quick so you can see what that looks like. I'll just add one, and I'll just put in like nothing. So there you go. And if you notice, when I go to print it, it will keep going in this ugly way. I'm working on improving that, but because that's annoying, that's lame. But I often don't run into that problem myself because I'll usually create one sort of film log per sheet, which can be mildly cumbersome in 4x5. I'm taking a lot of the same thing, but it's the way I do it, and I'll try to improve this a little bit. So if folks want to do it some other way, it's maybe a little bit more flexible. That's the way it works today, at least at the time of this video. And gosh, if you're still here, that pretty much is mostly what the film log is for. But hey, since you're here, if you want to keep watching for some masochistic reason, I can cover darkroom prints real quick and some of the other features of the film log. So with darkroom prints, you can only put in the exposures that you've actually logged. So it gets a little weird if you're using bulk roll film in 35 mil because the exposure numbers don't always line up. Or if you're using something like P30, which doesn't have any frame numbers at all. So it's not perfect. But the reason I do it this way is so you can easily find the negative like in the print file if you want to go like make another one in the future. And the idea is I did add paper. This paper is global, so I forgot. So some of the features that you add, like filters and holders, cameras and lenses, obviously are per user, and some things are global. So the films are global, paper is global, and you can see it's a small list here. I need to expand on it, but the idea is that it's more efficient to store all that once. The downside is that there's only a certain number of types of films. I don't have a lot of expired film in the list. And like I said, I don't have a lot of paper, but I'll be adding that. And certainly if there's not a film that's in the list you want to use, just submit a bug and I'll get it added. Um, see, we'll add a split grade just for fun. We'll say it's an enlargement. And we're doing 8 by 10. I didn't add an enlarger lens or an enlarger, but if I had, I could have picked them here. We'll say I'm doing f8. Say to 20. I don't specify this here. It's presumed inches, but you could do millimeters or centimeters. It doesn't matter. There's no unit conversion. This is just for your use. And then we'll say I did 30 seconds. The way I did split grade is not super good right now because you can't actually specify what filters you use. And for me, I just put them in the notes. So I just say like, we'll say I did 0 for 15 seconds. And well, that's lame. We'll say I did it this way. There you go. That's how I do it. And also you can pick if you've scanned the print that you made, you can put it here. If you haven't, like if you're like me and you use this while you're actively making darkroom prints, like my darkroom's like in the other room, so I can just walk back and forth in here. And as I like make a print that I like, that's a keeper, I'll go and write down the notes almost immediately from having made it. So pretty easy for me to do it, but it means I haven't scanned it yet because the print's still wet. So you can always add the image later by just clicking on edit and then editing and finding the JPEG. For contact sheets, it doesn't work that way yet. You have to add the file when you create the contact sheet. That's technically a bug. I just haven't fixed it yet, but you could kind of do the same thing here. So if you're a big fan of analog contact sheets, you can log all that here, and then you have a nice reference of all your negatives, and that's pretty cool, I think. So that's kind of how you do darkroom prints. I kind of glossed over some things, but hopefully you get the idea. I've been touching on film stock a lot, so I might as well talk about that as a feature. You can basically add films that you use. So I will say Velvia, and we'll say 36 rolls. We'll say 5. And you can create a number of these. So I think I mentioned sheet film being kind of a bear. So you can add sheet film. And then you can kind of increment and decrement them manually. Or it's not I don't have this exposed as a user preference yet, but it is in there. You can actually turn on a setting where it says, yes, I want to automatically track film stock. And when that's turned on, which I think it's turned on by default for any user, when it's turned on and you log an exposure, you log exposure for 4x5 or you log film for any of the other formats, it will actually take away from this. So if I log a new log in 35mm for Fuji Velvia in 36 exposures, it would actually decrement this for me. Super convenient for 4x5, at least for me. Again, as mentioned earlier, as long as you're accurate when you input stuff. If you get inaccurate, then you're going to have to do it manually. But keeping track of sheets is a huge pain for me. And I don't shoot 4x5 enough to just mow through a box of film super quick. So, I'll have a number of sheets in the fridge and only take them out, like 4 at a time. So that's what this feature is for. It's totally optional. And in fact, if you don't specify anything here, obviously it's not going to track it. So it's only if you add film and give it a non-zero number. Let's see what else is worth talking about. Could talk about enlargers. It's really just a simple form. And I kind of anticipated the Intrepid enlarger or some of the more modern LED mods you can do. Really, you can put whatever you want here. It's not super amazing because you can. There are things that might be easier to track, like the bulb type technically doesn't relate to the actual physical enlarger, but I did it here because I personally don't really change my light, my light sources very often in my enlargers. Lenses, though, are pretty convenient because you can add a whole bunch of lenses. So when you're making those darkroom prints, you can specify which lens you actually used and sort of go from there. There's no logic right now to say, oh, you're using 4x5, so you probably use this lens. You kind of have to specify that manually. Anyway, this has gone on way too long, and I knew it would, but that's more or less how the film log works. Couple things about it is you can certainly use www.thefilmlog.org. Right now, anybody can use it for free. If it starts getting expensive, I might, ask for people to maybe help cover the hosting cost or whatever. Or maybe I'll have premium features. I don't know. The whole point is I don't want to put ads on this thing, and I want to keep it open source. And on that note, you can also just download your own Dern version if you'd like by going to the same place where log-a-bug is. You can just go to the repository and pull it down. And if you want to submit code, you're more than welcome to do that. It's open source on the GPL v3, so if you want to host it on your own, be it on a Raspberry Pi or somewhere else, you totally can. So anyways, that's that. Like I said, this has gone way longer. If anybody has any questions, like I said, I'm on the Discord under M00DAWG. and you can always log a bug, and bug or a feature, because there's a whole bunch of work that still needs to be done, and some not so nice things. If you like, there's a few things, like if you type the letter A in an exposure, it will, like, I think, catch that. Oh no, it doesn't. So you can do crap like that, and it will tell you something broke. So there's a lot of like little minor things here and there that I need to clean up, but it works well enough for me. And that's the thing. Like, making those nice to haves do take time, and if more people start using it, I think it'll be worth it. But if not, I don't run into these problems often enough for my own purposes to really deal with it. I'm more worried about features that help me make it easier to log the films and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, if you somehow got to the end of this video, that's kind of unbelievable. So I guess thanks. And again, hopefully you enjoy using the film log. I'd certainly welcome any feedback and input folks have. So please provide it, because I can't fix what I don't know. So yeah, with that, I'm just going to press the stop button before this gets any worse. So catch you later.